On the evening of December 29, 1980, 3 Texans embarked on a drive through the quiet, piney woods north of Houston, only to return with a harrowing story that would consume their lives. Betty Cash, Vickie Landrum, and Vickie's young grandson Colby were traveling along State Road 1485 in Dayton, Texas, after a relaxed dinner out. But what should have been a straightforward, unremarkable drive home quickly transformed into an encounter so bizarre and traumatic that it left the 3 with life-altering health issues and a string of questions they're still waiting to have answered. Their encounter on that winter night set off a chain of symptoms and strange events that would follow them until their deaths. Official explanations were scarce, but the effects on the witnesses were all too real. Physical trauma, endless doctor visits, financial ruin, and a battle for acknowledgement in a world where UFOs and radiation burns are dismissed as things of fantasy. This is the Cash Landrum UFO incident. The drive had been peaceful until around 9 p.m. when a peculiar light appeared on the horizon, piercing through the thick pine trees that lined the rural road. Initially, the 3 passengers assumed it was an airplane en route to Houston Intercontinental Airport, some 35 miles away. But as they rounded a bend, the light grew closer and brighter. Finally, they could see its source. There, suspended just above the treetops, was a massive diamond-shaped object emitting an intense, almost oppressive heat. Bright flames poured from the bottom of the craft, creating a spectacle of otherworldly brilliance and terror. Cash, alarmed but curious, brought the car to a halt. Vickie, a devout Christian, interpreted the light as a divine sign. "That's Jesus," she reportedly told young Colby, urging him not to be afraid. "He will not hurt us." But as the vehicle idled in the middle of the road, their comfort quickly gave way to confusion and fear. The heat emanating from the UFO was so powerful that it penetrated the car's metal body, forcing Cash and Landrum to shield their faces. When Vickie touched the dashboard, her hand left an imprint in the softened vinyl, preserved as evidence of the bizarre encounter. Cash stepped out of the car to get a better look, but immediately felt the scorching temperature. "The heat was tremendous," she recalled later. "It just felt like I was burning from the inside out." Moments later, as the craft hovered closer, Landrum urged Cash to get back into the car. The heat had become unbearable, and fear now outweighed curiosity. As the object floated above the road, it continued to emit flames, casting light across the darkened forest. Suddenly, out of the night sky, a large fleet of helicopters descended upon the scene. In total, 23 helicopters, identified by Cash and Landrum as twin-rotor Boeing CH-47 Chinooks, appeared from all directions, positioning themselves in what looked like a containment maneuver around the strange craft. Shaken and bewildered, Cash quickly restarted the car and the 3 continued driving. They watched in awe as the helicopters formed a tight formation around the glowing, fire-spewing object. It was a scene more suited to a science fiction film than the rural backwoods of East Texas. Eventually, the UFO, flanked by the helicopters, vanished from view. However, as they left the UFO behind, their ordeal was only just beginning. Within hours of returning home, all 3 fell ill. 7-year-old Colby woke in the early hours of the morning, crying and feverish, with his skin flushed and red. He vomited repeatedly, and Landrum, helpless to ease his comfort, began experiencing symptoms herself, including nausea, severe headaches, and what seemed like a bad sunburn. For Cash, the effects were even worse. Her body was covered with large, painful blisters, her face and hands dotted with angry red welts. Her eyes burned and she struggled to walk. On January 3rd, she was admitted to a Houston hospital, her symptoms so severe that she was nearly unconscious. Doctors examined her and found her condition baffling. Over the following weeks, she would lose more than 50% of her hair, and patches of skin on her face would peel away. Dr. Brian McClellan, her physician, said her condition was consistent with exposure to high doses of radiation, likening it to standing 3 to 5 miles from the epicenter of Hiroshima. Cash remained in the hospital for 6 weeks, battling what doctors eventually labeled as acute radiation poisoning. Vickie and Colby were also treated for milder versions of the same symptoms, though Vickie would later develop cataracts and, like Cash, would be plagued by a weakened immune system for the rest of her life. Desperate for explanations, Cash and Landrum sought help from various government agencies, hoping someone could shed light on what they had encountered and why they were left with such devastating injuries. They reached out to NASA, who directed them to aerospace engineer John Schuessler. Schuessler, a former NASA project manager and UFO investigator, took a deep interest in the case and began compiling evidence, interviewing the witnesses and visiting the site of the encounter. Schuessler's investigation confirmed several disturbing details. The road where the encounter took place showed signs of extreme heat, with one area visibly scorched. But within weeks of Schuessler's visit, the road was mysteriously dug up and replaced with fresh asphalt. Witnesses reported seeing unmarked trucks arrive and depart, carrying the charred debris away under tarps. Schuessler spoke to locals within a 5-mile radius, gathering additional reports of strange lights and helicopters on the night in question. At least 10 other residents had seen the UFO, while 7 or 8 others confirmed the presence of military helicopters. One witness, police officer L.L. Walker, recalled seeing the helicopters that night with his wife as they returned from a family visit. They watched as a line of helicopters flying low with search beams on crossed their path in the direction of the encounter. Convinced that the military was somehow involved, Cash and Landrum reached out to their U.S. senators, Lloyd Bentsen and John Tower. The senators arranged for an interview at Bergstrom Air Force Base, where Cash and Landrum met with military officials. They noted a map in the room, marked with the precise location of their encounter. The interview, recorded by a military stenographer, lasted more than 2 hours. Yet in the end, the officials denied any knowledge of the event, though they encouraged the women to file a formal complaint. In the years that followed, Cash and Landrum pursued a $20 million lawsuit against the U.S. government, alleging negligence and seeking redress for their injuries. Testimonies from NASA, the Army, the Air Force, and the Navy were given in court, all denying any involvement or responsibility. In 1986, a judge ultimately dismissed the case, citing insufficient evidence that the helicopters, or the UFO, were part of any known military operation. In the aftermath, skeptics have cast doubt on the veracity of the encounter. UFO investigator Philip J. Klass argued that their symptoms could be attributed to pre-existing health issues. Brian Dunning, a skeptic and host of the podcast Skeptoid, suggested that Cash and Landrum may have misinterpreted their ailments, amplifying their symptoms to compel the Air Force to take responsibility. He speculated that Cash's hair loss was due to alopecia areata, an autoimmune disorder, while Vickie's cataract was merely a product of aging. Even as skeptics picked at the case, John Schuessler and Dr. McClelland remained convinced of the women's authenticity and health crisis. For Schuessler, who reviewed the government's records, the truth lay somewhere between secrecy and denial. The twin-rotor helicopters reported by the witnesses were U.S. Army CH-47 Chinooks, suggesting the possibility of a classified experimental craft. Dr. McClelland, Cash's doctor, firmly believed her symptoms were consistent with severe radiation exposure. The Cash Landrum UFO incident remains a perplexing chapter in the annals of American UFO encounters, a case characterized by concrete physical evidence and credible witnesses, yet shrouded in official silence. For Betty Cash, Vickie Landrum, and Colby, the encounter wasn't just a brush with the unknown, but a deeply painful and life-altering event. All 3 struggled with weakened immune systems, recurrent health problems, and cancers until their deaths. Betty Cash continued to battle cancer, facing hospitalizations and surgeries annually, until her death in 1998, exactly 18 years to the day of the encounter. Vickie Landrum passed away in 2007. Both women, along with Colby, lived out their days grappling with the physical aftermath of that winter night, seeking answers that never came. What happened on that lonely Texas road? Was it a top-secret government experiment, an extraterrestrial encounter, or a strange convergence of unknown natural phenomena? 4 decades later, the Cash Landrum incident lingers as an unresolved case, a reminder of the mysteries that sometimes pass us by in the night, close enough to touch, but forever beyond our reach.